Hi everyone! How could I wrap up this year in terms of scooter testing other than with an iScooter? Since we started with an iScooter, I started this back in spring and now I'm finishing with it too, so it all comes full circle with this story. This iScooter, of course, is quite different from the one that was here in spring. It has a lot of good and bad features as well. I'll talk to you about all of these, but as usual, we'll start with unboxing, assembling and showing it. I will show the accessories, explain the specifications, and finally share the experiences. So what's it like to ride this scooter? There's not much to say in terms of assembly because it comes almost ready to go, as you see. The only thing you need to install from the box is the handlebar. You'll need to screw it in place with 6 screws, and you'll get an Allen wrench to do this. Allen key and screw, you'll be done in a flash and you're ready to go. Of course, as I usually say, check the brake and make sure there's enough charge and that nothing on the scooter is coming apart. But if all that checks out, you're good to go. What makes the assembly a bit more interesting is the number of accessories. For this scooter, we're getting a pretty decent little bag for carrying our stuff. A tube is included, which we usually do not find among accessories, which could be handy if our tire goes flat. If we get a flat tire, we can immediately change the inner tube and keep going. Besides that, there's the screw and the Allen key, and that's about it. So the assembly is simple, and those are the accessories for the wheels. They're numerous but not extras, and let's move on to the specifications. I'll start with the technical details. According to the manufacturer, the motor is 750 watts and the battery is 18 ampere hours and 48 volts. We have brakes on both ends. The front one is a drum brake and the rear one is an electronic brake. There's suspension in the front and rear. As I mentioned, they are inflatable tube tires, 10 inches. We have a light in the front and a light in the back, and the front light is a completely simple solution. And the rear light also lights up red. So if I pull the brake lever, it functions as a brake light. Interestingly, we have indicators on both ends of the handlebar, and it's also interesting how the scooter itself looks in terms of design. If you take a look at this scooter, it roughly resembles a steering wheel in appearance. Like a regular simple ropey scooter, same shape, maybe a tad bigger. Of course, a ropey scooter does not have front and rear suspension or a 750 watt motor or such a relatively large battery either. So that's just the appearance. The reality is completely different. It looks like a ropey scooter, but it is not. No, it's really not. The first thing I need to show you about the exterior is this is the dashboard and here is the handlebar. So there's not much interesting here as the brake lever is on the left side. This brake lever operates the front drum brake. We've got a bell and there's another lever that you can press with your thumb, and this one operates the rear electronic brake. We have 2 buttons for indicators, right and left, and a relatively large dashboard. This large dashboard deserves some attention because even in sunny weather we can see the numbers quite clearly. We can see the distance traveled, although unfortunately there is only a 4-bar indicator for the charge, and we have a nice little iScooter logo here. And besides that, we can also see which mode the scooter is in. It is currently in walking mode. We have 4 modes, and by pressing the button twice, we can switch modes. Eco, Drive. We can choose between the sport and walk modes. Basically, when the scooter arrives, the 4 modes will mean different top speeds. The walking mode is 6 kilometers per hour, then 10, 15, and 25 kilometers per hour. The top speed for the different modes. Anyway, the manufacturer claims that this scooter's top speed is 45 kilometers per hour, which of course might not be true. Oh, there's some trick, and yes, indeed, there is a trick. You need to pull the brake lever, and while holding it down, quickly press the power button 5 times in succession, and if you do this, you will unlock the speed limit. At least on paper, the maximum speed will be 45 kilometers per hour. There's not much else of interest here. Then on the right side, there's a little hook that you can use to latch the scooter to the rear mudguard when it's folded, and there's a throttle, and there's a light, as I mentioned earlier, here, and there's a light at the back. here, and when I pull the brake lever, this light starts flashing back here, which is our brake light. We do not have a rear turn signal. As I mentioned, there are indicators at both ends of the handlebars. They flash here and make a small beeping sound to indicate they are working. It's also important that the scooter has a cruise control feature, which can be disabled, and you can also disable the feature that makes it start with just the throttle, requiring a push with your foot instead. Additionally, it's very important to mention that there's a smartphone app available. With the app, you can enable these features, and you can also turn on the lamp through the app, but I don't think it makes much sense, so we'll probably end up using the phone to turn on the lamp. There's also a speedometer in the app showing how fast it's functioning, so there's no point to it. So that's about it for the specs. I'll show you the scooter around with this little camera so you can see it. So we have a pretty good front suspension with a relatively long spring travel and a nice rubberized footboard. Our footplate that your foot does not slip from. The scooter has an IP54 water resistance, and because of that we also get a little rubber cover for the charger. And then there's the rear suspension I mentioned, which also works really well. The handlebar folding mechanism is the usual solution. You pull up the lever, lower it, fold the handlebars backward, and you can lock it back in the same way. There's not much paint on it, just a type designation and those little red rubber plugs that serve as cable guides, and that's about it. What's interesting here is that there are no disc brakes. Instead, there's a drum brake on the front wheel, which is a little unusual and not something we're too accustomed to. So the scooter looks like this. I think it looks good. Nothing extra, but still quite a stylish piece. Well, that's about it. Let's move on to the part where what it was like to use it and what problems I encountered while using the scooter. I'll start with the bad things because there aren't too many, and since we're talking about a pretty good scooter, I don't want you to finish watching the video with a bad taste in your mouth. So, bad things. The bad thing is that they say this scooter has a 750 watt motor, but it doesn't have a 750 watt motor. At most, it reaches that at peak performance. The peak power might be 750 watts, but based on my experience, I would say it's more like between 450 and 500 watts. I can state this with a high degree of certainty, so the motor doesn't have 750 watts. Despite this, I'm not saying it's bad, because the 500 watts provide adequate performance and torque, just enough to achieve relatively high speed and good dynamism, but you won't feel like you're in danger or like it's trying to throw you off with every start. Wants to kill you or throw you off. It starts comfortably, smoothly, gently, and you'll be able to travel at a pretty decent speed with it. What speed can it actually reach? Well, the manufacturer claims it can reach 45 kilometers per hour, but that's not true. You can only reach that speed if you lift the rear wheel and let it spin in the air. Then indeed the speedometer will show you can go 45. But if you set the wheel down and stand on it, you won't be able to go 45, more like 30 to 35 kilometers per hour. You will be able to go 45 kilometers per hour on a flat road. The 45 is achievable if there is a 100 km per hour tailwind and you are going downhill. Otherwise, do not expect such speed. I would say this is a downside, but it is not because this scooter is relatively small in size. It's relatively small and equipped with rather thin pneumatic tires. Don't try to go over 30 kilometers per hour with it, because in my opinion, a scooter like this goes too fast at such a speed. Of course, there are those who are not afraid for their lives and are brave. So if you're that brave, then go ahead and buy a bigger scooter. And not the i10 Max. That's the second downside. The third issue is the turn signal. I'll show it on camera again because I really do not understand the point of this. The thing is, when you turn on the indicator, it flashes inside this rubber cap. And if I grab the handlebar, you really can't see anything blinking here. Interestingly, there's a rubber cap on it that's supposed to protect the indicator, and when I take it off you can actually see, so it's fairly easy to see the indicator blinking at the end of the handlebar, and even when I grip it, even when I hold it, you can still see that I'm signaling. But by putting this rubber cap on, you essentially lose all the good features of this signal because it becomes barely visible. I would recommend not relying too much on the turn signal, as it is quite dangerous. There is also a small issue I do not like, which is with the front light, or rather the bag. Yeah, I imagine when they were thinking about what else to include with the scooter, so someone suggested adding a little extra, and someone said, yeah, hey, there's a bag, let's include that. And we did. But no one really bothered to go outside and try it on the scooter to see how it looks on it. So it's quite annoying that when I attach the bag, these two straps, it's kept on the handlebar, and I can only attach one of the straps by placing it just above the cable, or more precisely, above the brake cable. And this bottom strap hangs quite long, which is supporting it. I cannot tighten it any further because when you look from the front, you can see that the light is just barely shining above the bag. And if I pulled it up higher, it would completely block the light, making the front illumination pointless. So so this bag is good, this bag is nice, it's great to have, but I'm 100% sure that nobody tried putting it on the scooter during the design process. If they had tried, they definitely wouldn't have come up with this solution. That's basically it. And there is no other downside really that I can mention, because the size is appropriate, the deck size is right. The suspension works really well. It's great to have pneumatic tires on it, and I really appreciate that it has a 500-watt motor with ample power and torque. The display is nice because it's easy to read, and the brakes are particularly effective. The only problem might be that both brake controls are located on one side. So if you want to use both brakes, you have to pull the lever while pressing down the other control simultaneously, and that's how you'll be able to brake with both at the same time. And the problem with that is that you cannot smoothly apply both braking forces at once. So you either pay attention to this one and apply it smoothly, or pay attention to that one and apply it smoothly. It's impossible to manage both simultaneously in a normal way. Like, maybe they could have switched the brake lever to the other side, because when I brake, I'm not using the throttle anyway. And if I'm not using the throttle, I could better control the drum brake with this hand and the motor brake with this hand, which would have been great. Both brakes are really strong, the motor brake and the drum brake. Perhaps we could have a bit more control. If it's not an emergency stop, use the rear brake, because even though it's not the mechanical disc brake on this scooter, the braking force is perfectly adequate. If you want to use both brakes, really lean back, because you'll experience an incredible braking force, and if you're not careful, the scooter will stop and you'll keep going. So the situation is, the brakes are fine, the suspension is fine, the deck is fine, and you won't be able to reach 96 kilometers with it, as the manufacturer claims. But I think that was pretty obvious to you by now. The motor power is fine, so the whole scooter is as it should be. I think it's all right, and the price is good too, but I'll talk about that a bit later, because there's still something I need to tell you about why this scooter is really, really great. The reason it's so awesome is that this scooter most likely won't count as needing a license or many permits to use. It will not fall into the category that requires a license and all kinds of permits. I think this because currently no insurance is needed for it either. Insurance is required when the scooter weighs more than 25 kilograms or can go faster than 25 kilometers per hour. If these conditions are not met, then you do not need to get insurance for it. And as when the scooter arrives, it is limited to 25 kilometers per hour. And if this is not unlocked, the maximum speed is 25 kilometers per hour. The scooter weighs 21.5 kilograms. It's below 25 kilograms. So currently, this is a type of scooter that doesn't fall into the flimsy scooter category, as it has proper tires, proper suspension, a decent size, and the motor can deliver a normal output around 500 watts. You can easily travel 15 to 20 kilometers without much effort. So it's not a rope roller sitter, even so you do not need insurance for it. You can easily ride it on a bike path since it covers a distance of 15-20 kilometers without much effort. And probably in the future, you will still be able to ride it on bike paths. You do not need any kind of permit or license, and the police will not fine you. So it is a really good alternative because it is strong enough, big enough, and yet does not require insurance. And I think that nowadays this is a really good argument for buying it. So I believe I have now told you everything. You can see in the pictures what it looks like and how I used it. I like it, and I think you will too. Especially considering the current dollar foreign exchange rate, an urban scooter with such capabilities and performance is a really good price. Moreover, by urban scooter, I mean that you can actually travel 15 to 20 kilometers with it, which is quite a performance and quite a distance. Despite that, with its 21 kilograms, you can easily take it on a train or even a bus, and it fits nicely into a car trunk since it is foldable. You can easily take it on a bus or put it in a car trunk since the scooter is foldable, making it a really handy little aid for city commuting. Under the video, you'll naturally find the usual link to the written article in the description. You will find the link to where you can purchase it, as well as the coupon code to get it for under 200,000 forints. I've said everything, so I'll say goodbye to you now. Take care, look after yourselves, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Everything I usually say at this point. I'll be back next week with a new video, so take care until then. Bye.